In the sprawling galaxy where dragons rule supreme and humans are barely tolerated as maintenance workers, there exists an unspoken truth. Fix what's broken, stay invisible, survive another day. But when Chief Engineer Marcus Chun heard the heartbroken wails of a dragon hatchling echoing through the Imperial Palace's ventilation system, he didn't think about protocols or survival. He thought about his own daughter, lost to the war 3 years ago, and how she used to cry just like that when her favorite toy broke. Some repairs, Marcus would learn, change everything. The Dragon Emperor Veil Throws had conquered 17 star systems, reduced proud civilizations to ash, and never once shown mercy. But he had never watched a human stranger fix his son's beloved toy with nothing but compassion and skill. He had never seen tears of gratitude replace tears of loss. And he had certainly never questioned whether the greatest strength in the universe might not be the power to destroy, but the power to mend what others would throw away. This is the story of how the smallest act of kindness between species became the foundation for galactic peace, and how a simple human engineer reminded the most feared ruler in the galaxy what it truly means to be strong. Marcus Chun wiped the sweat from his forehead as he crawled through yet another maintenance shaft deep within the Dragon Emperor's palace. The massive structure, carved from a single mountain on the planet Dracarys Prime, housed the most feared ruler in the known galaxy. For humans like Marcus, it was both workplace and prison. The ventilation system needed constant attention. Dragons preferred their environment hot and humid, which meant the cooling systems worked overtime. As the chief engineer for the human maintenance crew, Marcus spent most of his days in these cramped spaces, fixing what the dragon nobles broke or ignored. He paused at Junction 7 Alpha, checking his scanner. The air circulation in the eastern wing showed minor fluctuations, nothing critical, but worth investigating. As he adjusted his route through the maze of metal tunnels, a sound stopped him cold. Crying. Not the angry roar of an adult dragon or the commanding bellow he'd grown accustomed to over his 5 years of service. This was different. Heartbroken. Young. The sound of absolute despair that only a child could make. Marcus knew that sound too well. It transported him instantly back 3 years to the refugee camp on New Geneva. His daughter Sarah had cried exactly like this when the evacuation ships left her stuffed rabbit behind. He promised to get her another one, but the dragon raiders had come before he could keep that promise. The crying echoed through the ventilation shaft, growing louder as he followed the sound. His scanner showed he was near the Imperial family's private quarters, a section strictly off-limits to human staff. The punishment for being caught here would be immediate execution, but something about that desperate sobbing pulled him forward. Through a ventilation grate, Marcus peered into an enormous chamber decorated with golden tapestries and floating crystal lights. The room belonged to a dragon hatchling, perhaps 6 or 7 years old in human terms. The young dragon was no larger than a horse, his scales of brilliant emerald green that would darken to the imperial black as he matured. Prince Zethris, if Marcus remembered the briefings correctly, the Emperor's only son. The hatchling sat in the center of his vast bed, clutching something broken in his tiny claws. His serpentine neck was curled downward, and his whole body shook with each sob. Whatever he held was clearly precious to him, but from this distance, Marcus couldn't make out what it was. The crying intensified, and Marcus found himself thinking of Sarah again. How she'd refused to eat or sleep for days after losing her rabbit. How she'd searched through their meager possessions, hoping it would somehow appear. The memory made his chest tight. A deep voice boomed through the chamber, speaking in the ancient dragon tongue. Marcus's translator implant, standard equipment for all human workers, processed the words with a slight delay. Stop this wailing, young prince. It is unseemly for one of royal blood. Emperor Veil Throws himself strode into view. Even in his humanoid form, the Dragon Emperor stood nearly 8 feet tall, his presence filling the vast room. His eyes glowed with inner fire, and when he moved, the air itself seemed to bend around him. This was a being who had conquered star systems with his bare hands, who commanded fleets that stretched across the galaxy. Father, please, the young dragon whimpered, holding up the broken object. Can't the palace artificers fix Starwing? Marcus squinted through the grate and, finally, saw what the hatchling clutched. It was a toy starship, beautifully crafted but clearly broken. One wing had snapped off completely, and the main body showed stress fractures along its hull. To adult eyes, it was just a plaything. To a child, It was everything. Star Wing is beyond repair, the Emperor said, his voice carrying the finality of absolute authority. The artificers examined it. The quantum matrix in the propulsion system is fractured beyond their skills. Accept this loss, and choose another toy from your collection. But I don't want another toy. Prince Zethris wailed, fresh tears streaming down his scaled cheeks. Star Wing was special. Grandfather made it for me before he went to the eternal flame. It's the only thing I have left of him. The Emperor's expression softened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained firm. Prince Korath the Wise has joined his ancestors. Clinging to broken relics will not bring him back. A dragon must learn to let go of what cannot be saved. I can't let go, the hatchling sobbed. I won't. Marcus watched as the Emperor struggled with his son's pain. Even through the cultural barrier, he could see a father trying to comfort his child while teaching him hard lessons about loss. But Marcus also saw something the Emperor might have missed, the way the young dragon's claws traced the break lines on the toy, the careful way he held the pieces together. This wasn't just grief. This was hope. The hatchling believed his toy could be fixed, if only someone cared enough to try. The Emperor sighed, a sound like distant thunder. I must attend the war council. The human rebellion grows bolder by the day, and Admiral Nexus reports troubling developments from the Outer Rim. Compose yourself before I return, young prince. Tomorrow we begin your combat training, and dragons do not enter battle with tears in their eyes. As the Emperor's footsteps faded, Prince Zethris curled up around his broken toy and wept even harder. The sound echoed through the ventilation system, each sob like a knife in Marcus's heart. He should leave, return to his scheduled maintenance, file his report, and forget what he'd witnessed. Interfering with the Imperial family would mean death, and he had responsibilities to his crew. 12 other humans depended on his leadership to keep them alive in this hostile environment. But as the hatchling's crying continued, Marcus thought about the toy's construction. He caught a glimpse of its internal mechanisms when the young dragon held it up to his father. The quantum matrix the Emperor mentioned. Marcus had worked on similar systems in human starships. The technology was different, more elegant than human engineering, but the basic principles were the same, and those fractures in the hull. Marcus had seen similar damage 1,000 times during the war. Metal fatigue from repeated stress, the kind of wear that came from a beloved toy being played with constantly. It looked bad, but it might be reparable if someone had the right tools and enough patience. Marcus made a decision that would change his life forever. He carefully removed the ventilation grate, testing its weight to make sure it wouldn't make noise. The drop into the chamber was about 12 feet, manageable if he lowered himself down slowly. His tool belt contained everything he typically needed for repairs, plus a few items he'd improvised over the years. As his boots touched the ornate floor, Prince Zethris looked up in shock. The young dragon scrambled backward on his bed, eyes wide with surprise and fear. "Please don't be afraid," Marcus said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I heard you crying, and I think I might be able to help." The hatchling tilted his head, confusion replacing fear. "You're a human. Humans aren't allowed in the family quarters. Father will have you executed." "Probably," Marcus admitted. "But before that happens, can I look at your toy? I'm an engineer. I fix things that are broken." Prince Zethris clutched Starwing tighter to his chest. The palace artificers said it couldn't be repaired. They're much smarter than a human maintenance worker. Marcus smiled sadly. "Maybe they are, but sometimes being smart isn't the same as caring. I had a daughter, who lost her favorite toy too. I know how much it hurts." Something in Marcus's voice must have convinced the young dragon. Slowly, carefully, Prince Zethris extended his claws and offered the broken starship. Marcus accepted it with the reverence it deserved. The toy was a work of art, clearly crafted by a master. Its hull was made from some kind of adaptive metal that shifted color in the light, and its broken wings still hummed with residual energy. The quantum matrix the Emperor had mentioned was visible through a transparent panel in the ship's belly, a complex arrangement of crystal filaments that pulsed with faint blue light. "This is beautiful work," Marcus murmured, turning the toy over in his hands. "Your grandfather was a true artist. He was the wisest dragon who ever lived," Prince Zethris said, pride and sorrow mixing in his voice. "He can make anything. This ship was supposed to teach me about the stars, about all the worlds beyond Drakkars Prime." But now it's broken, and I'll never learn those stories. Marcus examined the damage more closely. The wing had snapped off at its connection point, but the break was clean. The stress fractures in the hull were superficial, probably caused by the wing's sudden separation. The quantum matrix showed signs of disruption, but the crystal filaments themselves appeared intact. Prince Zethris, Marcus said carefully, I think your toy can be fixed. Not perfectly. There might always be a small scar where the wing reattached, but it should fly again. The hatchling's eyes went wide. Really? You're not lying to make me feel better. I never lie about repairs, Marcus said. It'll take time, and I'll need to be very careful, but yes, I think Star Wing can soar again. For the first time since Marcus had started watching, Prince Zethris smiled. It was a radiant expression, full of hope and trust that made Marcus's heart ache. This was why he'd become an engineer in the first place. Not to maintain palace systems or keep dragons comfortable, but to fix the things people cherished. To turn tears into smiles. Will you really help me? The hatchling asked. Marcus nodded, already planning his approach. He'd need to realign the quantum matrix first, then carefully fuse the wing back to the hull. The adaptive metal would be tricky to work with, but he had experience with similar materials. It would take several hours, maybe more, but it was definitely possible. I'll need to take it to my workshop, Marcus explained. I have tools there that can help. But Prince Zethris, you must understand. If your father discovers what I'm doing, it will mean trouble for both of us. The young dragon nodded solemnly. I won't tell anyone. I promise. Will you bring Starwing back? Marcus considered. The Emperor would be in war councils for most of the day, but evening brought dinner and the prince's tutoring sessions. Tomorrow night, when the palace is quiet. But you have to act normal until then. Can you do that? I'll try, Prince Zethris said, wiping the last tears from his eyes. Thank you, Engineer Marcus. You're very kind. How do you know my name? The hatchling looked embarrassed. Sometimes I listen to the human maintenance reports when they're broadcast through the communication system. Your voice is different from the others. Warmer. Marcus felt a pang of unexpected emotion. In 5 years of service, he never thought any of the dragons paid attention to individual humans. They were just tools to be used and replaced when broken. But this young prince had been listening, learning the names and voices of people his father saw as beneath notice. I should go, Marcus said, carefully tucking the broken toy into his tool bag. Remember, this is our secret until I return tomorrow. Our secret, Prince Zethris agreed, settling back onto his bed with the first real peace Marcus had seen on his face. As Marcus climbed back into the ventilation system, replacing the grate behind him, he wondered what he'd gotten himself into. Helping the Emperor's son was dangerous beyond measure, but walking away would have been impossible. Some things transcended species boundaries. Love, loss, the desperate hope that broken things could be made whole again. In his workshop that night, surrounded by the familiar tools of his trade, Marcus began the delicate work of repairing Starwing. Each adjustment to the quantum matrix required absolute precision. One wrong move would destroy the toy beyond any hope of recovery. But as he worked, Marcus thought about the smile on Prince Zethris's face, and his hands remained steady. By dawn, sweat beaded on his forehead, and his eyes burned from close work, but Starwing was whole again. The wing attachment showed a thin silver line where he'd fused the metal, and the quantum matrix hummed with restored power. When he activated the toy's hover function, it rose smoothly from his workbench, its hull shimmering with renewed life. Marcus smiled, remembering another time he'd worked through the night to fix a broken toy. Sarah's music box, the one her mother had given her before the evacuation. He'd managed to repair it just in time for her birthday, and the look on her face when it played again had been worth every hour of lost sleep. Now he had to figure out how to return Starwing to its young owner without getting them both killed. The Dragon Emperor was many things, but understanding was not typically among them. If Veilthrows discovered that human had entered his son's chamber without permission, Marcus pushed those thoughts aside. He'd made a promise to a heartbroken child, and he intended to keep it. Whatever the consequences, Prince Zethris would have his grandfather's gift restored. The sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor outside his workshop made Marcus quickly shut down Starwing and hide it in his tool bag. Another day of maintaining the palace systems awaited, but tonight he would complete the most important repair of his life. As the workshop door opened and his assistant Kevin entered with the daily assignment roster, Marcus realized that yesterday's crying hatchling had reminded him of something he'd almost forgotten in 5 years of servitude. He was still human, and humans didn't abandon those who needed help, regardless of the cost. The next evening, Marcus waited until the palace settled into its nighttime rhythm before making his way back to Prince Zethris's chambers. The corridors echoed with distant sounds, the rustle of dragon guards changing shifts, the whisper of air through ancient stone passages, and the ever-present hum of the palace's massive energy core. His tool bag felt heavier than usual with Starwing nestled inside, fully repaired and ready to fly. The quantum matrix had stabilized perfectly during his final tests, and the wing attachment showed no signs of stress. It was some of his finest work, and Marcus felt the quiet pride that came with the job done right. The ventilation shaft seemed narrower tonight, perhaps because tension made everything feel more claustrophobic. As he approached the familiar grate, Marcus could hear movement in the chamber below. Prince Zethris was awake, probably waiting for his return. Marcus carefully removed the grate and lowered himself into the room. Prince Zethris sat on his bed in humanoid form, looking much smaller and more vulnerable than his dragon shape suggested. His green eyes were bright with expectation and barely contained excitement. "Did you really fix it?" the young prince whispered, glancing toward his chamber door. "I've been thinking about it all day, but I was afraid to hope too much." Marcus smiled, pulling the restored toy from his bag. "See for yourself." Starwing emerged from its protective wrapping like a butterfly from its cocoon. The adaptive metal hull gleamed in the soft light of the floating crystals, and the wing showed only the faintest line where it had been reattached. To most observers, the toy looked perfect, but Marcus knew Prince Zethris would notice every detail. The young dragon's breath caught in his throat. With trembling claws, he reached out to accept his restored treasure. It looks exactly like it did before." "How'd you do this?" "Very carefully," Marcus said, activating the toy's hover function with a small remote he crafted. Starwing rose smoothly from Prince Zethris's palms, its quantum matrix humming with gentle power. The toy performed a slow loop around the chamber, its movement as graceful as any real starship. Prince Zethris laughed with pure delight, a sound that warmed Marcus's heart. "It flies. It really flies again. Grandfather's stories aren't lost after all." "Your grandfather built something amazing," Marcus said, watching the toy respond to the young dragon's gestured commands. "The engineering is far beyond anything humans have achieved. I just put the pieces back together." "Father said it couldn't be repaired," Prince Zethris murmured, guiding Starwing through an intricate flight pattern he'd obviously practiced many times before. "The palace artificers are supposed to be the wisest craftsmen in the Empire. How were you able to succeed where they failed?" Marcus considered his answer carefully. "Sometimes the difference isn't in knowledge or skill. Sometimes it's about understanding what something means to the person who owns it. Your artificers saw a broken toy. I saw a young dragon's broken heart." Prince Zethris looked at him with an expression far too mature for his apparent age. "Is that why humans fight so hard against the Empire? Because they understand hearts." The question caught Marcus off guard. In 5 years of service, no dragon had ever asked him about human motivation beyond simple survival instinct. "I think," Marcus said slowly, "humans fight because they believe some things are worth the struggle. Family, freedom, the right to fix what's broken instead of throwing it away. Even when the fight seems hopeless. Especially then." Prince Zethris guided Starwing to land gently on his bed, his expression thoughtful. "Grandfather used to tell me stories about the old days, before the Empire conquered so many worlds. He said dragons once lived differently, more like..." A deep voice thundered from the doorway, freezing both Marcus and Prince Zethris in place. "More like what, my son?" Emperor Veilthrows stood in the chamber entrance, his massive frame filling the doorway. He wore his humanoid form, but power radiated from him like heat from a star. His golden eyes fixed on Marcus with the intensity of a predator recognizing prey. "Human," the Emperor said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Explain your presence in my son's chamber. Speak quickly before I decide that words are unnecessary." Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs, but he forced himself to remain calm. Panic would help no one, least of all Prince Zethris. "Your Majesty, I came to return something to your son. Something I repaired." The Emperor's gaze shifted to Starwing, still glowing softly on the bed. His eyes widened slightly, a crack in his usual composure. That toy was declared beyond repair by the finest artificers in my empire. Father, look! Prince Zethris held up Starwing with obvious pride. It flies perfectly now. Engineer Marcus fixed it when everyone else said it was impossible. Silence. The command carried enough force to make the air in the chamber vibrate. Prince Zethris immediately fell quiet, but his grip on Starwing tightened protectively. The Emperor stepped into the chamber, and Marcus instinctively moved between the imposing figure and the young dragon. The action was automatic, born from years of protecting his own daughter, but it didn't go unnoticed. You shield my son from me? There was dark amusement in the Emperor's voice. Do you think I would harm my own heir? I think you're angry, Marcus said carefully. And when parents are angry, sometimes children get hurt, even when that's not the intention. The Emperor's eyes flared with inner fire. You dare lecture me on parenthood? You, whose species abandons their young to flee from my armies. We don't abandon them, Marcus said, thinking of the evacuation ships and the impossible choices they'd forced on desperate families. We try to save them the only way we can. Sometimes that means leaving everything else behind, including broken toys. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. The Emperor somehow knew about Sarah, about the stuffed rabbit, about the promises Marcus had failed to keep. Sometimes, he said quietly, we don't have a choice. But when we do have a choice, when we can fix what's broken, then we should try. Emperor Veilthrows moved closer, and Marcus could feel the heat radiating from his body. You violated the most sacred laws of my empire. You entered the imperial family's private quarters without permission. You exposed my son to danger through your presence. The punishment for such crimes is death, carried out immediately and without appeal. Father, no. Prince Zethris scrambled off his bed, still clutching Starwing. He only wanted to help. He didn't hurt anyone. Return to your bed, Zethris, the Emperor commanded. This human's fate was sealed the moment he chose to trespass. But he fixed Starwing. Tears began forming in the young dragon's eyes. The artificers said it was impossible, but he made it whole again. Doesn't that matter? What matters, the Emperor said, his voice growing dangerously soft, is that laws exist for reasons. Order must be maintained, even when... He paused, his gaze settling on the perfectly restored toy in his son's hands. Even when the outcome is unexpectedly positive. Marcus watched the internal struggle playing out on the Emperor's face. Here was a ruler who had built an empire on absolute authority, confronted with a situation that defied simple categorization. A human had broken the law, yes, but only to perform an act of kindness for the Emperor's own son. Your Majesty, Marcus said, choosing his words with extreme care. I accept full responsibility for my actions. But before you pass judgment, may I ask you something? The Emperor's eyebrows rose slightly. You are in no position to make requests, human. When you were young, did you ever have something precious that was broken? Something you thought you'd lost forever? For a moment, something flickered across the Emperor's expression, a shadow of old pain, quickly suppressed. What relevance could such matters have? Prince Zethris told me this toy was a gift from his grandfather. Not just any toy, but the last connection to someone he loved and lost. I had a daughter who lost something similar. The look in her eyes when it was gone. It's the same look I saw in your son's eyes yesterday. The Emperor was silent for a long moment, his gaze moving between Marcus and Prince Zethris. The young dragon had stopped crying, but remained tense, clearly afraid for both his toy and his unexpected friend. You speak of your daughter in past tense, the Emperor observed. Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice for a moment. She died during the evacuation of New Geneva. Dragon raiders attacked the refugee ships. She was holding her broken toy when the hull breach took her. The chamber fell silent except for the gentle hum of palace systems. Prince Zethris looked stricken, his young mind struggling to process the concept of a parent losing a child. Even the Emperor seemed affected by the stark simplicity of Marcus's loss. And yet, the Emperor said finally, despite losing your own child to my forces, you chose to help mine. Yes. Why? Marcus thought of all the complex answers he could give, about shared grief transcending species boundaries, about the human instinct to protect the innocent, about the simple fact that a crying child was a crying child, regardless of what form they took. But, in the end, only one answer felt true, because he was hurting and I could help. Sometimes that's enough. The Emperor studied Marcus with an intensity that felt like being examined under a microscope. "Show me how you repair the quantum matrix." The request was so unexpected that Marcus blinked in confusion. "Your Majesty, the palace artificers declare the matrix irreparably fractured. Yet this toy functions perfectly. I would understand your methods." Marcus retrieved Star Wing from Prince Zephyrus, who reluctantly allowed the transfer. Using his portable tools, Marcus opened the toy's access panel and pointed to the crystal array within. The matrix wasn't actually broken, he explained, falling back into his engineering mindset. The filaments had been displaced by the trauma of the wing separation, but they were still intact. I used harmonic resonance to guide them back into proper alignment, then reinforce the connections with microwelding. The real challenge was working with your adaptive metal. Its properties change based on emotional resonance from the user. The Emperor's eyes sharpened with interest. "You understand emotional resonance in dragon metallurgy?" "I had to learn. Your son's connection to this toy created a feedback loop that made standard repairs impossible. I had to work with the metal's desire to remain broken, gradually convincing it that wholeness served Prince Zephyrus better than continued damage." "Fascinating." The Emperor accepted Star Wing and examined Marcus's work more closely. "Our artificers attempted purely technical solutions. They never considered the emotional component. Technology serves people, not the other way around," Marcus said. "At least, that's what my daughter taught me. She always said broken things were just waiting for someone who cared enough to make them whole." Prince Zephyrus looked between his father and Marcus with growing hope. "Does this mean Engineer Marcus won't be executed?" The Emperor was quiet for a long time, turning Star Wing over in his massive hands. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a strange tone Marcus had never heard before: uncertainty. "Human Engineer Marcus Chun," the Emperor said formally, "you have committed crimes against the Imperial Order that demand the ultimate punishment. You have also demonstrated skills that exceed those of my finest artificers, and shown compassion toward my heir when you had no obligation to do so." He paused. "This presents a unique judicial challenge." Marcus waited, hardly daring to breathe. "I am inclined to commute your death sentence," the Emperor continued, "in exchange for service that makes use of your unusual talents. You will become my son's personal tutor in the art of repair and restoration. You will teach him not only technical skills, but the philosophy behind them, this idea that caring can accomplish what pure knowledge cannot." Relief flooded through Marcus so suddenly that his knees nearly gave out. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I accept gladly." "Do not thank me yet," the Emperor warned. "This appointment comes with conditions that may prove more challenging than simple execution. You will live in the palace, eat at the imperial table, and be treated as a valued member of my court. But you will also answer for Prince Zephyrus' education and development. If my son fails to learn what you teach, if he proves unable to master these human concepts of caring and restoration." The Emperor's eyes glowed with inner fire. "Then both tutor and student will face consequences far worse than death." Prince Zephyrus looked excited despite the implied threat. "I'll be the best student ever, father. I promise." "We shall see," the Emperor said, though Marcus caught a hint of affection in the stern words. "Engineer Chun, you will report to the Master of Protocols tomorrow morning for reassignment. Your new quarters will be in the East Wing, near the Prince's chambers." As the Emperor moved toward the door, he paused and looked back at Marcus. "Tell me, human, when you saw my son's distress yesterday, what stopped you from simply reporting the noise and continuing with your duties?" Marcus thought of Sarah again, of promises made and broken, of the sound a child makes when the world fails them. "Sometimes, Your Majesty, the most important repairs can't wait for proper authorization." The Emperor nodded slowly. "Perhaps there is wisdom in your species after all. Good night, Engineer Chun. Prince Zephyrus, it is past your bedtime." After the Emperor left, Prince Zephyrus rushed to Marcus and wrapped him in an enthusiastic hug. "You're staying? You're really staying?" Marcus returned the embrace, feeling something in his chest that had been frozen since Sarah's death began to thaw. "I'm staying, young prince. And tomorrow, if you'd like, I can tell you more stories about fixing things." "I'd like that very much," Prince Zephyrus said, settling into his bed with Starwing clutched safely in his arms. "Engineer Marcus, thank you for keeping your promise." As Marcus climbed back into the ventilation shaft for the last time, He realized that in fixing a broken toy, he'd somehow begun to repair his own broken heart. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, and the delicate work of building trust between species that had been at war for decades. But tonight, a young dragon slept peacefully with his grandfather's gift restored, and an old human engineer remembered what it felt like to matter to someone again. Sometimes, Marcus reflected, the most important engineering projects weren't about machines at all. They were about the connections between people, the fragile bridges that could span the greatest distances. In his new quarters that night, Marcus lay awake planning lessons about more than just repair techniques. He would teach Prince Zethyrus about the principles behind the work, patience, persistence, and the belief that broken things deserved a second chance. But, more than that, he would show the young dragon what his own father had glimpsed tonight, that strength sometimes came not from the power to destroy, but from the courage to mend what others had given up on. The sound of Starwing's gentle hum through the walls told him that at least one repair had been perfectly successful. Tomorrow, he would begin the far more complex task of helping to fix the relationship between two species that had forgotten how to see each other as anything more than enemies. 3 months into his new role as Prince Zethyrus's tutor, Marcus had learned to navigate the complex politics of the imperial court while maintaining his focus on education. The palace buzzed with whispered conversations about the human who ate at the emperor's table and walked freely through chambers once forbidden to his kind. His new quarters in the East Wing were larger than any space Marcus had called home since before the war. A workshop had been constructed adjacent to his rooms, equipped with tools that represented the finest of both human and dragon engineering. It was here that he and Prince Zethyrus spent most of their time together, working on increasingly complex repair projects while discussing philosophy, engineering principles, and the nature of creation itself. This morning brought their most ambitious project yet. Word had spread through the palace about Marcus's abilities, and several dragon nobles had begun requesting his services for items their own artificers couldn't repair. The current challenge sat on the workshop's main table, an ancient communication device belonging to Lady Cirith, the Emperor's sister. "It's beautiful," Prince Zethyrus said, examining the device's intricate crystalline structure. "But I don't understand why Aunt Cirith values it so much. She has access to the most advanced communication technology in the Empire." Marcus smiled, recognizing the learning opportunity. "What do you see when you look at this device, Prince Zethyrus?" The young dragon, now more confident after months of lessons, considered the question carefully. "I see old technology, inefficient compared to modern systems. The crystal array is fragmented, the harmonic resonance is completely off, and the quantum entanglement matrix shows signs of severe degradation." "All technically correct," Marcus agreed. "But what else do you see?" Prince Zethyrus frowned, concentrating harder. "The craftsmanship is excellent for its age. The crystalline structure suggests it was made during the Third Dynasty, probably by the royal artificers of Vaelthros Prime. The wear patterns indicate heavy use over many centuries." Getting warmer, Marcus encouraged. "But you're still thinking like an artificer. Try thinking like someone who cared about this device." The young dragon's eyes lit up with understanding. "The wear patterns aren't random. They correspond to specific activation sequences. Someone used this device repeatedly for the same types of communication. And look," he pointed to tiny scratches near the base. "These marks are deliberate. Someone carved symbols here." Marcus nodded approvingly. "Very good. Those symbols are love marks in the ancient dragon script. This device was used by Lady Cirith to communicate with someone she cared deeply about. Based on the frequency modulations still stored in the crystal memory, I'd guess it was her mate during the Outer Rim campaigns 200 years ago." Prince Zethyrus's expression grew solemn. "She lost him in those campaigns, didn't she? Father mentioned it once when he thought I wasn't listening." "That's right. Commander Zephyros died defending the mining colonies on Kepler, 442. This device contains the last messages they exchanged." Marcus carefully lifted the device's primary crystal. "Your aunt didn't bring this to us because she needed a communication tool. She brought it because she wanted to hear his voice again." The weight of responsibility settled on Prince Zethyrus's young shoulders. "How do we repair something that carries so much emotion? What if we damage the store messages while fixing the hardware?" "That," Marcus said, "is exactly the right question to ask. This is why caring matters in engineering. If we approach this as just another repair job, we might succeed, technically while failing completely in what actually matters. They spent the next several hours analyzing the device's structure, mapping its crystal matrix, and identifying the specific points where degradation threatened the stored communications. Marcus guided Prince Zethris through the process of emotional engineering, understanding not just how something worked, but why it mattered to its owner. The key insight, Marcus explained as they worked, is that this device was never just about communication. It was about connection. The artificers who built it understood that love requires maintenance, just like any complex system. Every component was designed to preserve and strengthen the emotional bonds between users. Prince Zethris carefully adjusted a crystalline resonator with tools barely large enough for his claws. Is that why human relationships seem different from dragon ones? Because you treat them like something that needs constant repair and attention? The question caught Marcus off guard. In his months at court, he'd observed the formal, hierarchical nature of dragon relationships. Even the bond between Emperor Vaeltheros and his son followed strict protocols and traditions. Love was present, but rarely openly expressed. I think, Marcus said carefully, that all relationships need maintenance, whether the people involved are human or dragon. But humans might be more comfortable admitting when something is broken and needs fixing. Dragons prefer to appear strong and unchanging, Prince Zethris mused. But that means we sometimes break inside while pretending everything is perfect on the outside. The observation was remarkably mature, and Marcus realized that their repair lessons were teaching the young dragon more than just technical skills. What do you think would happen if dragons were more willing to admit when things needed fixing? I don't know, Prince Zethris admitted. It sounds dangerous. What if other dragons saw weakness and tried to take advantage? What if they saw honest need and tried to help instead? The question hung in the air as they returned to their work. The communication device was proving even more complex than Marcus had initially assessed. Centuries of use had created quantum entanglements throughout its structure, meaning that repairing one component risked disrupting others. They needed to approach it like a living ecosystem rather than a simple machine. Engineer Marcus, Prince Zethris said as they paused for lunch. May I ask about your daughter? You've mentioned her several times, but you never told me her name. Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest that accompanied thoughts of Sarah. Her name was Sarah. She was about your age when she died, maybe a little younger. She wanted to be an engineer like her father. What was she like? Curious. Stubborn. She had this way of looking at broken things and seeing not what was wrong with them, but what they could become if someone cared enough to fix them. Marcus smiled at the memory. She once spent 3 days repairing a music box that played her mother's favorite song. The internal mechanism was completely shattered, but Sarah refused to give up. She said the music was trapped inside and needed to be set free. Prince Zethris listened intently, his young face serious with concentration. Did she succeed? Eventually. The music box never worked quite the same way again. It played a little slower, and some of the notes were different. But Sarah said that made it special because now it was telling a new story about surviving difficult times. She sounds very wise. She was. Marcus returned to the communication device, using the work to steady his emotions. That's part of why I wanted to help you with Starwing. Sarah taught me that broken things aren't worthless things. They're just things waiting for someone who understands their value. The afternoon brought unexpected visitors to the workshop. Emperor Vaeltheros arrived with Admiral Nexus, the dragon military commander responsible for the ongoing war against human resistance forces. The Admiral's presence immediately changed the atmosphere in the room, his cold gaze fixing on Marcus with obvious disapproval. Father, Prince Zethris said, bowing formally. Admiral Nexus, we're working on Aunt Siritha's communication device. Would you like to see our progress? The Emperor nodded, but Admiral Nexus stepped forward with barely contained hostility. Your Majesty, I must protest this arrangement. Allowing a human access to ancient dragon technology, especially military-grade communication systems, represents a significant security risk. Marcus carefully set down his tools and faced the Admiral directly. I understand your concerns, Admiral. If you'd prefer, I can leave while you discuss them with His Majesty. No, the Emperor said firmly. Admiral Nexus will speak his mind in your presence, or not at all. Continue with your objections, Admiral. Admiral Nexus's eyes flared with inner fire. This human has access to our most sensitive technologies. He studies our engineering methods, learns our manufacturing techniques, and gains intimate knowledge of our capabilities. What guarantees do we have that this information won't reach the human resistance? He gave his word, Prince Zethris said before anyone else could respond. Engineer Marcus promised to serve our family with honor. His actions have proven his commitment. The word of a human, Admiral Nexus said dismissively. Their species is known for deception and betrayal. They smile while planning to stab you in the back. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest, but forced himself to remain calm. Losing his temper would only confirm the Admiral's prejudices. Admiral, may I ask you a question? Speak quickly, human. In your experience with human resistance forces, have you encountered many engineers among their ranks? The Admiral's eyes narrowed suspiciously. What relevance does that have? Engineering requires patience, precision, and long-term thinking. Most engineers make poor guerrilla fighters because we're trained to build things, not destroy them. If I wanted to help the resistance, I'd be far more valuable designing better weapons or fortifications than repairing ancient communication devices in the Imperial Palace. Unless, Admiral Nexus said, the communication device contains strategic information that could benefit your cause. Marcus gestured to the device on the table. This unit has been thoroughly scanned by your security forces. Its quantum storage contains exactly what I said. Personal messages between Lady Cirith and her deceased mate. Love letters, if you will. Not exactly military intelligence. Emperor Veilthrows had been listening to this exchange in silence. But now he stepped forward. Admiral Nexus, your concerns are noted and will be considered. However, Engineer Chun has proven his value to my family. Unless you have specific evidence of treachery, these general suspicions are insufficient grounds for action. The Admiral's frustration was obvious, but he bowed stiffly. As you command, Your Majesty. I merely urge continued vigilance. After the Admiral left, the Emperor remained in the workshop, examining the communication device more closely. Engineer Chun, answer me honestly. Does this work give you access to sensitive military information? Marcus admitted. Dragon engineering is more advanced than human technology in several key areas. But, Your Majesty, I've been studying your methods for months now. If I intended to betray your trust, I would have acted long ago. And why haven't you? Marcus looked at Prince Zethris, who was listening intently to this conversation. Because betraying your trust would mean betraying his. And I gave him my word that I would teach him everything I could about repair and restoration. A promise to a child is sacred, regardless of species. The Emperor studied Marcus for a long moment. You realize that your position here is precarious. Many in my court question the wisdom of elevating a human to such status. Admiral Nexus is not alone in his suspicions. I understand, Your Majesty, but I also understand something else. Marcus gestured to the communication device. This repair isn't just about fixing old technology. It's about preserving love, honoring memory, and maintaining connections across time. Those are universal values, not human or dragon-specific. Explain. Marcus activated a partially repaired section of the device, and Lady Cirith's voice emerged from the speakers, young and full of joy. My beloved Zephyros, the star gardens of Andromedan 4 are blooming tonight. I wish you were here to see them with me. The Emperor's expression softened almost imperceptibly as he recognized his sister's voice from 2 centuries ago. Continue the repair, he said quietly. But, Engineer Chun, understand that your actions reflect not only on yourself, but on all humans in my service. Do not make me regret showing mercy. After the Emperor left, Prince Zethris looked troubled. Engineer Marcus, are you really in danger? Some of the court nobles have been saying terrible things about humans. Marcus considered his answer carefully. The young dragon was beginning to understand political complexities, but he was still a child who needed reassurance. There are always dangers when different groups of people try to live together peacefully. But that doesn't mean we should stop trying. What if Admiral Nexus convinces Father that you're a threat? Then, I'll face whatever consequences come, Marcus said simply. But, Prince Zethris, remember what we've learned about repair work. Sometimes things get worse before they get better. Sometimes you have to take apart a system completely before you can put it back together properly. Are you talking about the communication device or something else? Marcus smiled, impressed by the young dragon's perceptiveness. Both, perhaps. Change is never easy, especially when it challenges old assumptions about how things should work. They returned to their repair work, but Marcus could sense that Prince Zethris was processing more than just technical information. The young dragon was beginning to understand that their lessons had implications far beyond engineering theory. They were exploring questions about trust, prejudice, and the possibility of friendship between former enemies. As evening approached and the communication device neared functional status, Marcus realized that Admiral Nexus had been partially correct about one thing. This work was changing how Prince Zethris viewed humans and their capabilities. But rather than representing a security threat, that change might be the foundation for a different kind of future, one where repair and understanding mattered more than conquest and dominance. The first clear message from Lady Siritha's device played as they completed the final adjustments, and Marcus watched Prince Zethris's face light up with the joy of successful restoration. In that moment, the young dragon looked exactly like Sarah had when her music box finally played again, proud, happy, and convinced that broken things could always be made whole again with enough patience and care. Perhaps that was the most dangerous idea Marcus was teaching after all, the radical notion that nothing was beyond repair if someone cared enough to try. 6 months after Marcus's appointment as Prince Zethris's tutor, the precarious peace within the imperial palace shattered like crystalline glass under pressure. The catalyst came in the form of devastating news from the front lines of the ongoing war between the Dragon Empire and human resistance forces. Marcus was working late in his workshop when alarms began sounding throughout the palace. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in harsh red illumination, and the measured footsteps of dragon guards echoed through the stone passages. He'd experienced these alerts before. Usually they indicated attacks on outlying colonies or significant military developments. But tonight felt different. Prince Zethris burst into the workshop without his usual polite knock, his young face pale with distress. "Engineer Marcus, something terrible has happened. Father has called an emergency war council, and Admiral Nexus is demanding." He paused, struggling with words that clearly frightened him. "He wants all humans in the palace arrested immediately." Marcus set down the delicate circuit he'd been repairing and gave Prince Zethris his full attention. "What happened, Zethris? What changed?" The young dragon's hands trembled as he handed Marcus a data tablet, displaying military reports. The human resistance destroyed 3 supply convoys yesterday, but they used dragon technology to do it. Somehow they acquired military-grade quantum disruptors and adaptive armor. Admiral Nexus says the only way they could have obtained such technology is if someone in the palace provided it. Marcus finished, understanding immediately why the Admiral's suspicions had focused on him. "And I'm the only human with access to advanced dragon engineering." "It's not true," Prince Zethris said fiercely. "You would never betray us. You fixed our wing. You repaired Aunt Siritha's communication device. You've taught me so much about caring and restoration. You're not a spy." Marcus felt a cold weight settling in his stomach. The timing was catastrophically bad. 3 major military defeats, dragon technology in enemy hands, and the court already suspicious of human loyalty. Admiral Nexus would have no difficulty convincing the Emperor that Marcus represented an unacceptable security risk. "Prince Zethris," Marcus said carefully, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. I have never provided technology or information to the human resistance. But evidence can be manufactured, and in times of war, fear makes people see threats everywhere. Your father has difficult decisions to make." Heavy footsteps approached the workshop, and Emperor Veilthrows appeared in the doorway. His expression was granite hard, showing none of the warmth that had developed over the past months. Behind him stood Admiral Nexus and a squad of palace guards in full battle armor. "Engineer Chun," the Emperor said formally, "you will accompany these guards to a secure chamber where you will await questioning about your potential involvement in recent attacks against Imperial forces." "Father, no." Prince Zethris stepped between Marcus and the guards. "Engineer Marcus is innocent. He's been with me every day. When would he have had time to contact the resistance?" "Step aside, my son," the Emperor commanded. "This is a matter of Imperial security, not personal sentiment." Marcus placed a gentle hand on Prince Zethris's shoulder. "It's all right, Zethris. Your father is doing what he must to protect the Empire. I'll answer their questions truthfully, and the truth will speak for itself." "But they won't believe you." Prince Zethris said, tears beginning to form in his eyes. Admiral Nexus has convinced half the court that all humans are secretly working together. They want someone to blame for the military defeats. Admiral Nexus stepped forward, his expression coldly satisfied. The evidence is compelling, Your Majesty. The resistance forces used quantum disruptor technology that matches the theoretical frameworks Engineer Chun has been studying in his workshop. The adaptive armor shows manufacturing techniques consistent with methods he's learned from our palace artificers. Correlation is not causation, Marcus said calmly. Many engineers study similar principles. The fact that resistance forces have improved their technology doesn't prove I provided assistance. Perhaps not, Admiral Nexus agreed. But it provides reasonable grounds for suspicion. Combined with your unprecedented access to sensitive systems, your knowledge of palace security protocols, and your obvious emotional connection to the enemy cause. What emotional connection? Prince Zethris demanded. The Admiral's smile was cruel. Did you think we hadn't investigated his background thoroughly? Engineer Chun lost his daughter during our conquest of New Geneva. His wife died in the same attack. His entire family was killed by dragon forces, yet he claims to serve us loyally. What father wouldn't seek revenge for such losses? The workshop fell silent except for the humming of various devices and the distant sound of military preparations throughout the palace. Marcus felt Prince Zethris's shocked gaze and knew the young dragon was struggling to reconcile this new information with everything he thought he knew about his tutor. Is it true? Prince Zethris whispered. Did dragons kill your family? Marcus met the young dragon's eyes directly. Yes, dragon raiders attacked the evacuation ships. My wife and daughter died when the hull was breached. So did thousands of other innocent people. Then what? Prince Zethris's voice broke. Why did you help me? Why didn't you hate me? Because, Marcus said gently, you are not responsible for choices made by others before you were even born. Because hatred destroys the person carrying it more than anyone else. And because you were a child who needed help, and that mattered more than old pain. Emperor Veilthrows had been listening to this exchange with an unreadable expression. Now he spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of command. Your words are eloquent, Engineer Chun. But words cannot outweigh evidence. The resistance attacks were too sophisticated, too perfectly targeted. Someone provided them with detailed intelligence about our supply routes and defensive capabilities. Your Majesty, Marcus said, I understand why you suspect me. I would make the perfect scapegoat, a human with access and motive. But consider this. If I wanted to help the resistance, why would I stay here for 6 months teaching your son about empathy and understanding? Why would I work to build bridges between our species instead of burning them down? Perhaps, Admiral Nexus suggested, that was precisely the cover you needed. Who would suspect the loyal tutor who dotes on the imperial heir? Marcus felt frustration rising, but forced himself to remain calm. Admiral, you're describing a level of deception that would require extraordinary planning and execution. Do you really believe human resistance forces are sophisticated enough to plant a deep cover agent in the Imperial Palace? I believe humans are capable of any treachery if it serves their cause, Admiral Nexus replied coldly. Prince Zethris suddenly stepped forward, his young voice clear and determined. Father, I have something to say about this. The Emperor raised an eyebrow. This is not a matter for children, Zethris, but it is a matter about someone I know better than anyone else in this room, Prince Zethris said. You're all talking about Engineer Marcus like he's some mysterious figure whose true nature is hidden. But I've spent every day with him for 6 months. I've watched him work, listened to him teach, seen how he treats broken things and broken people. Continue, the Emperor said, though his tone suggested limited patience. Engineer Marcus could have gained my trust in many ways, Prince Zethris said, his voice growing stronger. He could have given me gifts, flattered me, told me I was special because I'm a prince. Instead, he taught me that everyone and everything deserves care and attention. He showed me that fixing things requires patience, understanding, and genuine concern for their well-being. Admiral Nexus snorted dismissively. Pretty words from a child who doesn't understand political realities. I understand more than you think, Prince Zethris shot back, surprising everyone with his sudden fierce intensity. I understand that Engineer Marcus cries sometimes when he thinks nobody is watching, because he still misses his daughter. I understand that he keeps a picture of his family in his workshop and tells them about his day every evening. I understand that he refused a larger salary because he said he didn't deserve luxury while other humans suffered in work camps. The workshop fell silent again, the weight of Prince Zethris's words settling over everyone present. Marcus felt a complex mixture of emotions: pride in his young student's insight, grief at having his private pain exposed, and hope that perhaps the truth might actually matter. Most importantly, Prince Zethris continued, I understand that if Engineer Marcus wanted revenge against dragons, he could have found easier ways than helping us become better than we are. He could have taught me to hate humans, to see them as inferior beings worthy only of conquest. Instead, he taught me to see them as people who feel pain and loss just like we do. Emperor Veilthros studied his son intently. And what do you believe this proves about Engineer Chen's loyalty? I believe, Prince Zethris said, that loyalty isn't about blind obedience or having the same blood. I believe it's about choosing to care for someone even when you have good reasons not to. Engineer Marcus lost everything to our war, but he chose to help me anyway. If it's not loyalty, what is? Admiral Nexus stepped forward aggressively. Your Majesty, we cannot allow sentiment to override security concerns. The evidence strongly suggests, the evidence, interrupted a new voice from the doorway, suggests something quite different. Everyone turned to see Lady Cirith entering the workshop, carrying what appeared to be a military datapad. The Emperor's sister moved with the confident grace that marked all members of the royal family, but her expression was grim. Sister, the Emperor said, this is not the time. Actually, brother, this is precisely the time, Lady Cirith said. I've just completed my analysis of the Resistance attacks, and I've discovered how they obtained our technology. She activated the datapad, projecting holographic displays that showed supply convoy routes, attack patterns, and technology transfer logs. The quantum disruptors weren't stolen or reverse-engineered. They were sold by corrupt officials in the Outer Rim territories. The adaptive armor came from black market dealers who've been smuggling military equipment for decades. Admiral Nexus's face paled slightly. Lady Cirith, surely you're not suggesting— I'm not suggesting anything, Admiral. I am stating facts. The Resistance obtained our technology through criminal networks that have existed far longer than Engineer Chen has been in our service. Networks that you were supposed to be monitoring and eliminating. The projection showed a complex web of connections between corrupt dragon officials, criminal smugglers, and Resistance purchasing agents. None of the information trails led back to the Imperial Palace or Marcus's workshop. Furthermore, Lady Cirith continued, I've reviewed the communication logs from Engineer Chen's workshop. Every device he's repaired, every system he's accessed, every conversation he's had with palace staff. If he were passing information to the Resistance, there would be evidence. There is none. Emperor Veilthros examined the data displays carefully. Sister, are you certain of this analysis? Completely. The technology transfers occurred through established criminal channels. The timing correlates with Resistance payments to known smugglers, not with Engineer Chen's activities. Admiral Nexus's theory, while politically convenient, is factually incorrect. The workshop filled with tension as Admiral Nexus realized his accusations were crumbling. But, rather than accepting defeat gracefully, his expression hardened with desperate anger. Evidence can be falsified, he said coldly. Communications can be erased. Lady Cirith has been known to favor human causes. Careful, Admiral, Emperor Veilthros said, his voice carrying lethal warning. You are speaking about my sister and heir to the Imperial throne. I speak only truth, Your Majesty. Admiral Nexus continued recklessly. This human has corrupted your son's thinking, influenced your sister's judgment, and somehow convinced you to ignore obvious security threats. He is a cancer in the heart of our empire. The air in the workshop suddenly became scorching hot as Emperor Veilthros' control over his inner fire began to slip. You forget yourself, Admiral. Engineer Chen has served my family with honor and distinction. Your accusations are baseless, and your tone borders on treason. Then, I will speak plainly, Admiral Nexus said, his own anger overriding his political sense. Either this human dies, or I will ensure that the noble houses understand how their emperor has been weakened by misplaced sympathy for the enemy. The threat was unmistakable. Obey Admiral Nexus or face a potential coup attempt. Marcus realized that his presence had become a catalyst for larger political tensions within the Dragon Empire. Forces that had nothing to do with him were using his case to challenge Emperor Vael'Thros' authority. "Father," Prince Zethris said quietly, "whatever you decide about Engineer Marcus, don't let Admiral Nexus threaten you. A true dragon doesn't bow to bullies." The simple wisdom of the child's words seemed to settle something in Emperor Vael'Thros' mind. When he spoke again, his voice carried absolute authority. "Admiral Nexus, you are relieved of duty pending investigation into your competence and loyalty. Guards, escort him from the palace immediately." As Admiral Nexus was removed under heavy guard, still shouting threats and accusations, Emperor Vael'Thros turned to Marcus with an expression that mixed regret with determination. "Engineer Chun, you have been cleared of all suspicion regarding the resistance attacks. However, your presence here has become a source of dangerous instability within my government. For your safety and the stability of the realm, I must ask you to leave the palace." Marcus felt his heart sink, but he understood the Emperor's position. "I accept your decision, Your Majesty. When would you like me to depart?" "Tomorrow morning. Lady Sirith will provide you with transportation to any human settlement within the Empire, plus compensation for your service to the Imperial family." "No." Prince Zethris rushed to his father's side. "Father, you can't send him away. He hasn't done anything wrong." "Sometimes, my son," the Emperor said gently, "doing nothing wrong isn't enough to avoid the consequences of other people's fears and hatred. Engineer Chen understands this." Marcus knelt down to Prince Zethris's eye level. "Your father is protecting both of us, Zethris. If I stayed, Admiral Nexus's supporters would never stop trying to use me against your family. This way, I can leave with honor, and you can continue growing into the wise leader your people need." "But I still have so much to learn," Prince Zethris protested. "You haven't finished teaching me about emotional resonance in quantum systems, or how to repair binaural networks, or you've learned the most important lesson already," Marcus interrupted gently. "You understand that caring about the outcome makes the difference between good engineering and great engineering. Everything else is just technical detail." As Marcus prepared to leave the workshop for the last time, he reflected on how much had changed since that first night when he'd heard a hatchling crying. He'd expected to fix a toy and fade back into obscurity. Instead, he'd helped repair something much more complex: the relationship between a young dragon and the idea that kindness could exist between enemies. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and an uncertain future. But tonight, as Prince Zethris hugged him goodbye with tears in his young eyes, Marcus knew that some repairs lasted long after the engineer walked away. 2 years had passed since Marcus left the Imperial Palace, but the ripple effects of his time there continued to spread through the Dragon Empire in ways no one could have predicted. He now lived in New Haven, a human settlement on the border world of Kepler 438b, where he worked as a civilian engineer helping to rebuild communities damaged by the ongoing war. The settlement was a modest collection of prefabricated buildings and converted cargo containers, home to about 3,000 humans who had found themselves caught between warring factions. Marcus had established a workshop in the old communications center, where he spent his days repairing everything from water purifiers to medical scanners, always with the same philosophy he'd taught Prince Zethris, that broken things deserve care and attention regardless of their perceived value. He was working on a damaged atmosphere processor when his assistant, Elena, burst into the workshop with news that changed everything. "Marcus, you need to see this broadcast immediately." She activated the workshop's main screen, which flickered to life, showing the familiar golden halls of the Imperial Palace. But instead of the usual military briefings or diplomatic announcements, the image showed something unprecedented. Emperor Vael'Thros and Prince Zethris, now clearly a young adult, standing together before the combined Dragon Council. "Citizens of the Empire," Emperor Vael'Thros began, his voice carrying across the galaxy through quantum communication networks. "Today marks a fundamental change in our approach to the ongoing conflict with human resistance forces. After careful consideration and consultation with my advisors, I am announcing a unilateral ceasefire, effective immediately." Marcus nearly dropped his tools in shock. A ceasefire? From the Dragon Empire? It was unthinkable. "This decision," the Emperor continued, "has been influenced by insights provided by my son and heir, Prince Zethris, who has spent considerable time studying alternative approaches to conflict resolution. The camera angle shifted to show Prince Zethris stepping forward. Marcus gasped. The young dragon he remembered had grown into an impressive figure, standing nearly as tall as his father, but carrying himself with a confidence tempered by wisdom rather than arrogance. "Fellow dragons," Prince Zethris said, "for too long we have defined strength as the ability to conquer and control others. But true strength lies in the power to repair what has been broken, to restore what has been lost, and to build bridges where others see only chasms." Elena glanced at Marcus with growing understanding. "He sounds like you." "My son speaks wisdom," Emperor Veilthrows said. "The war has brought us military victory, but spiritual poverty. We have conquered worlds while losing sight of what makes conquest worthwhile. Today, we begin the work of restoration." The broadcast continued with details of the ceasefire terms: immediate cessation of military operations, establishment of neutral zones for humanitarian aid, and the creation of joint committees to address prisoner exchanges and reparations. But Marcus barely heard the specifics. He was focused on the subtle changes in Prince Zethris's bearing, the thoughtful way he spoke about complex issues, and the clear evidence that their lessons together had taken root and flourished. The broadcast concluded with an announcement that sent shock waves through the settlement. To facilitate these negotiations, Prince Zethris said, "I will be traveling to neutral worlds to meet directly with human representatives. These discussions will focus not on terms of surrender, but on principles of mutual understanding and shared prosperity." As the screen went dark, Elena turned to Marcus with amazement. "That dragon prince, he learned those ideas from you, didn't he?" Marcus nodded slowly, still processing the magnitude of what he'd just witnessed. "We talked about repair and restoration, about seeing value in broken things. But this, I never imagined he'd apply those concepts to something as large as an interstellar war." The workshop's communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. Marcus activated the receiver, expecting routine administrative traffic from the settlement council. Instead, Lady Siritha's familiar voice filled the room. "Engineer Chun, I hope this message finds you well. By now you've seen the ceasefire announcement. What you don't know is that Prince Zethris specifically requested permission to visit your settlement as part of his diplomatic mission. He wants to see you again, and more importantly, he wants to show you what he's learned." Marcus felt his heart race. After 2 years of wondering whether his time in the palace had meant anything beyond temporary comfort for a lonely child, he was about to learn the true scope of his influence. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. New Haven had never hosted a diplomatic mission from any major power, let alone the heir to the Dragon Empire. The settlement's modest facilities were expanded and improved, communication networks were tested and upgraded, and security protocols were established to protect both the visiting delegation and the human residents. When Prince Zethris's transport ship finally appeared in the sky above New Haven, Marcus stood with the other settlement leaders on the improvised landing pad they'd constructed from cargo containers and metal plating. The ship was elegant and understated, clearly dragon technology, but lacking the aggressive military styling that typically characterized Imperial vessels. Prince Zethris emerged from the ship in humanoid form, followed by a small retinue that included Lady Sirith and several other dragons Marcus didn't recognize. But what struck him most was how Prince Zethris had changed. The uncertain child was gone, replaced by a confident young leader who moved with purpose and grace. Their eyes met across the landing pad, and Prince Zethris smiled, the same radiant expression Marcus remembered from their workshop sessions, but now carried by someone who clearly understood the weight of his responsibilities. "Engineer Marcus," Prince Zethris said, approaching with formal but genuine warmth. "It's good to see you again." "Your Highness," Marcus replied, offering a respectful bow. "You've grown considerably since our last meeting." "In more ways than one, I hope," Prince Zethris said. "I have much to show you and even more to discuss. But first, I want to see your workshop. Lady Sirith tells me you've continued our work on restoration and repair." As they walked through New Haven's simple streets, Marcus noticed how Prince Zethris observed everything with keen interest. He asked questions about the settlement's infrastructure, the challenges of rebuilding in a war zone, and the ways humans had adapted dragon technology for peaceful purposes. You're evaluating more than just our facilities, Marcus realized. You're studying how communities heal after conflict. Very perceptive, Prince Zethris said. That's exactly what I'm doing. Because the real work isn't ending the war. That's relatively simple. The real work is repairing the damage it's caused, both physical and emotional. They reached Marcus's workshop, and Prince Zethris paused at the threshold with obvious emotion. May I? Marcus opened the door and welcomed the young dragon into his workspace. It was smaller than their palace workshop, but filled with the same kinds of projects, broken devices waiting for patient attention, complex problems that required both technical skill and emotional understanding. Prince Zethris moved through the space like a pilgrim visiting a shrine, touching familiar tools and examining ongoing repairs. He paused at a workbench where Marcus had been restoring a child's toy robot, damaged during a recent evacuation. Tell me about this project, Prince Zethris said. It belongs to a girl named Luna, Marcus explained. Her family fled their home during the fighting 3 months ago. She managed to save this robot, but it was damaged during the journey. Her parents brought it to me because she hasn't spoken since they arrived. They think fixing her toy might help her start healing. Prince Zethris carefully examined the robot's internal mechanisms. Complex emotional trauma manifesting through attachment to a damaged object. The repair isn't just technical, it's therapeutic. Exactly. Sometimes fixing the object helps fix the person. That's what you did for me, Prince Zethris said quietly. When you repaired Starwing, you weren't just fixing a toy. You were teaching me that broken things could be made whole again, that caring about the outcome was more important than following standard procedures. Marcus felt a deep satisfaction hearing Prince Zethris articulate the lesson so clearly. And now you're applying that understanding to much larger problems. I'm trying to. But, Marcus, I need your help with the most complex repair project either of us has ever attempted. Prince Zethris activated a portable holographic projector, filling the workshop with three-dimensional displays showing star charts, population data, and damage assessments from across the known galaxy. The scope of destruction was staggering. Entire worlds scarred by warfare, refugee populations scattered across hundreds of systems, infrastructure destroyed on a scale that boggled the mind. This is what I'm trying to repair, Prince Zethris said. Not just the physical damage, but the trust, the hope, the basic belief that different species can coexist peacefully. And, honestly, I have no idea how to approach something this complex. Marcus studied the holographic displays, his engineer's mind automatically beginning to analyze the challenge. The same way we approach Starwing, he said finally. First, we figure out what the most critical damage is. What breaks everything else if it's not addressed first? The hatred, Prince Zethris said immediately. On both sides, dragons see humans as inferior beings who need to be controlled. Humans see dragons as monstrous oppressors who can never be trusted. As long as that fundamental prejudice exists, any peace agreement is just a temporary pause before the next war. So we need to change how people see each other, Marcus mused. But how do you repair something as intangible as perception? That's exactly what I hoped you could help me figure out, Prince Zethris admitted. Because you already did it once. You changed how I see humans, and, through me, you influenced how my father approaches human relations. I want to scale that up. Marcus felt the weight of the challenge Prince Zethris was describing. Changing individual minds was difficult enough. Changing the attitudes of entire civilizations seemed impossible. But, as he looked at the young dragon who had grown from a crying hatchling into a leader wise enough to seek peace, Marcus realized that impossible repairs were simply the ones that required more patience and care. Tell me about the resistance to these peace negotiations, Marcus said. Who opposes the ceasefire and why? Prince Zethris manipulated the holographic display to show political maps of both human and dragon territories. On the dragon side, about 40% of the noble houses consider peace negotiations a sign of weakness. They believe humans should be conquered completely rather than treated as equals. Among humans, maybe 60% of resistance leaders think this ceasefire is a trap designed to make them lower their guard before a final assault. Both sides expect betrayal because that's what they've experienced for generations, Marcus observed. They're emotionally damaged by decades of conflict. Trust has been broken so many times that most people can't imagine it being repaired. Exactly. And that's where I think your approach to restoration might apply. When we repaired Aunt Siritha's communication device, you taught me that we had to work with the emotional resonance, not just the technical specifications. What if we applied that principle to peace negotiations? Marcus began pacing around the workshop, his mind working through the implications of treating diplomatic relations like an engineering project. Emotional resonance in quantum systems, the components have to want to work together. But how do you make entire populations want peace when they've been conditioned to expect war? I have an idea about that, Prince Zethris said. What if we started small, like you did with me? Individual connections between people who can serve as examples for larger groups. He adjusted the holographic display to show a detailed map of the border regions between dragon and human space. There are dozens of systems where both species live in proximity, but rarely interact peacefully. Mining operations, trading posts, research stations. What if we established joint projects in these areas, collaborative efforts that require dragons and humans to work together toward common goals? Marcus studied the proposed locations, his excitement growing as he understood Prince Zethris's vision. Practical cooperation that demonstrates mutual benefit. People working side by side, solving problems together, building relationships based on shared accomplishments rather than shared fears. And you would coordinate these projects, Prince Zethris continued. You understand both human and dragon engineering principles. You've proven you can bridge cultural differences, and, most importantly, people on both sides respect your integrity. The proposal was breathtaking in its ambition. Marcus would essentially become a roving ambassador for interspecies cooperation, traveling between worlds to establish joint projects that prove dragons and humans could work together successfully. It was dangerous, uncertain, and absolutely crucial. Prince Zethris, Marcus said carefully, this kind of work would take decades. There would be failures, setbacks, probably attempts on my life from extremists on both sides. And success isn't guaranteed. We might prove that peaceful coexistence is impossible on a large scale. I know, Prince Zethris said simply, but the alternative is perpetual war until one side completely destroys the other. And I've learned from the best teacher I ever had that broken things deserve a chance to be repaired, even when the damage seems irreversible. Marcus thought about Luna's damaged robot on his workbench, about Prince Zethris's broken toy years ago, about his own daughter's music box that had played with a slightly different melody after being repaired. Sometimes the most important fixes change things rather than simply restoring them to their original state. There's something else, Prince Zethris said. Father wanted me to ask you about accepting a formal position as special advisor for interspecies relations. You would have diplomatic immunity, access to imperial resources, and authority to negotiate on behalf of the Dragon Empire in matters related to peaceful cooperation. The offer was staggering. Marcus would go from being a settlement engineer to holding one of the most important diplomatic positions in the galaxy. But more than that, he would have the chance to help shape the future relationship between dragons and humans for generations to come. I need to think about this, Marcus said. It's not just my life that would change. This settlement depends on my work here, and there are people who need... Actually, Lady Siritha's voice came from the workshop doorway. We've considered that as well. Marcus turned to see Lady Sirith entering with Elena and several other settlement engineers. Elena was carrying a datapad and grinning with obvious excitement. We've been discussing a proposal, Elena said. If you accept Prince Zethris's offer, we want to expand your workshop concept into a full academy for interspecies engineering cooperation. Students from both human and dragon communities would study here, learning not just technical skills, but the philosophical approaches you've developed. The Settlement Council has already approved the expansion, another engineer added. We would hire additional staff, construct proper facilities, and establish exchange programs with Dragon Technical Institutes. New Haven would become a center for the kind of cooperation Prince Zethris envisions. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the scope of what was being proposed. His simple workshop would become an institution dedicated to proving that different species could work together successfully. It was exactly the kind of project Sarah would have loved, taking something small and personal and growing it into something that could change the world. There's one more thing, Prince Zethris said. I brought something that belongs to you. He reached into his travel bag and carefully withdrew a familiar object that made Marcus's heart skip a beat. It was Star-winged, now clearly well-maintained and obviously still cherished. But Wrapped around its hull was a small piece of fabric that Marcus recognized immediately, a fragment from Sarah's stuffed rabbit. "I found this in your old quarters after you left," Prince Zethris explained gently. "I thought you might want it back, but I also wanted you to see that Starwing still flies perfectly. Your repair has lasted through hundreds of flights and countless adventures. Some fixes really are permanent." Marcus accepted the toy with hands that trembled slightly. The fabric from Sarah's rabbit had somehow become incorporated into Starwing's design, creating a hybrid memorial that honored both his lost daughter and his friendship with Prince Zethris. It was the most beautiful repair he had ever seen. "Thank you," he whispered, understanding that Prince Zethris had given him far more than a returned toy. He had shown Marcus that their work together had created something lasting and meaningful, a foundation that could support the massive reconstruction project they were discussing. As evening approached, and Prince Zethris prepared for the next stage of his diplomatic mission, Marcus made his decision. Standing in the workshop where he had continued the lessons they'd begun years earlier, surrounded by friends who believed in the possibility of a better future, he accepted the challenge of the largest repair project in galactic history. "I'll do it," he said simply, "but I want to establish the academy here first. Train the next generation of engineers who understand that technical skill and emotional wisdom are equally important. Then, we'll start building bridges one project at a time." Prince Zethris smiled with the radiance Marcus remembered from their first successful repair session. "Grandfather would have been proud," he said. "He always believed that true strength came from building rather than destroying." As the young dragon ship departed the next morning, Marcus stood in his workshop holding Starwing and thinking about the work ahead. There would be setbacks, failures, and moments when the task seemed impossible. But he had learned something important during his time in the Imperial Palace and his years in New Haven. The most meaningful repairs were often the most difficult ones, and broken things could become even stronger than they had been originally. The war between dragons and humans wasn't over yet, but for the first time in decades, both species had leaders who understood that some things were worth fixing rather than discarding. Marcus smiled, remembering Prince Zethris as a crying hatchling, and realized that sometimes the smallest repairs created the largest changes. He activated Starwing's hover function and watched it perform the graceful loops that had once brought such joy to a lonely young dragon. Tomorrow he would begin training the engineers who would help rebuild the galaxy one careful repair at a time. But tonight, he would honor his daughter's memory and his friends' trust by believing that even the most broken things could be made whole again. In the years that followed, the Marcus Chin Academy for Interspecies Cooperation would become the model for peaceful coexistence between dragons and humans. Its graduates would carry the lessons of patient restoration and emotional engineering to every corner of the galaxy, proving that understanding was stronger than hatred and that broken relationships, like broken toys, could be repaired by those who cared enough to try. The crying hatchling had grown into a wise leader. The grieving engineer had found new purpose. And the galaxy had learned that the greatest strength of all was the courage to mend what others would throw away. Some repairs, Marcus reflected, really did last forever.